is so positive, and you'd have to be, to get back up again and again and again and again. Like, these traumatic experiences, you said you did not want that pain to determine the rest of your life, and you said that over and over and over again, and that's a miracle, I gotta say.
Yeah, that's the thing about my kids, is that I absolutely did not want them to have to live with the lies and the secrets and the dysfunction. We have our own dysfunction for sure, but not in the way that I grew up. There's just so much that I want them to experience and know that they can come to me and that they can trust me with anything.
In the book of Isaiah, he says, I bring you treasures in the darkness so that you will know that I am God. There is darkness and it is real, but the Lord does give us moments of peace that can only be from him, and I'm thankful for those moments. So Heidi was sexually abused as a child by her father from age 3rd grade to 14. So we're just gonna throw that out there, because like I said, it's a tough topic. But she wanted to share her story, and when she told me her story, she said it very nonchalantly, and it was kind of shocking to me, right? Because she was so open about it. But she said, listen, I'm an open book, and she wants to help others with this story, and I'm really thankful for that. So will you talk for just a second about why you believe it's important to share stories like this, and if you would have heard something like this when you were a kid, if that may have changed a little bit of your outcome?
Absolutely. I feel it's important to share because I want to help people realize that there is, even though there's a lot of shame with this, there can be healing from really bad situations. And I feel like it's important to, because there were so many secrets in my life growing up, things that were brushed under the rug, and just, we don't talk about that kind of thing. I think it's really important that we all need to share our pain with each other so that other people can realize that you're okay and you can make this out alive and be happy. I would never wish this on anyone, but at the same time, God's in the business of redeeming lives.
Amen. There are several things that people always ask me when they hear stories like this, and one of the things is, because it happened for so long, 3rd grade to 14, and they ask, did you tell anybody? And you did.
I did. I talked to, I guess I just have an older sister. I talked to my sister about it. I know that she experienced some of it too, but about a year after it happened, just to kind of give you a little bit of a background, we moved a lot when I was growing up, and we lived in Oklahoma at the time, and my dad took me and my sister to start school, and we lived in a hotel room, one room. My mom was left back in Oklahoma to finish up the packing, and it was then that it just happened. It started happening, and I was having a really hard time with my multiplication and division, and we would stay up late at night, and he would get really angry with me, but in the middle of the night, he would have these urges, and I found a way to please him. So it was very difficult to understand what was happening. About a year later, I told my mom, who I was raised in the church, but it wasn't really a personal relationship with God. And I told her, and she said, she just sat there and listened. And because my sister kept telling me, Heidi, you need to tell mom, you need to tell mom. And I did, and I said, ooh, what are you gonna do about it? And she said, well, I'm either gonna, talk to him, or I'm gonna pray about it. And to a fourth grader, that really, who doesn't have a relationship with God, that doesn't really mean anything. And so a few days later, I asked her again, I said, what did you decide to do about it? And she said, I decided to pray for him.
And I think one of the interesting things as we've discussed is we all have moments where we can look back and see that we have changed in one way or another. And as we talked about this with Heidi, this was a moment for her where she realized she was really fighting for herself. She was the parent here. She didn't have, it wasn't her mom fighting for her. Certainly wasn't her stepdad fighting for her. In fact, there was a lot of manipulation in addition to the abuse. So it was really her trying to untangle the manipulation compounded with the abuse. So there's that moment for her that will become very pivotal later as she starts to figure out how is she going to make the best of the situation.
Yeah. You did not know what normal was, because this was the childhood she was given. She was a little kid, and this is the only mom she knew, and this is the only dad she knew. So she was looking to figure out what love was supposed to look like. That was very confusing, and she was looking for appropriate responses from her mother and from her father, and they just weren't there. But if that's the only thing you know, it can really be confusing as a kid, right?
And to let you know too, this was not my biological father. My mom grew up in an era where she got pregnant out of wedlock with my sister, and then got pregnant with me with the same man. But then he left us. So I already had abandonment issues with not realizing it at the time. So this is, yes, he is the only dad that I knew, and he adopted us and called us his own, but there was still just so much underneath the surface there.
So Heidi, fast forward several years to the point where you, I kind of, in my mind, have processed this as step 2 of you realizing that you're taking your future into your own hands, per se. But jump to the point where it really ends, the physical stuff actually ends.
At 14, I realized that when my dad was calling me into his room, when my mom and my sister were off at a band competition or whatever it was, I knew that the sappy sweetness that he was giving me, which is what I always longed for to hear because he was so volatile. We always wanted him to be in a good mood, but I realized that it was just, he wasn't being nice to me. He was being nice for selfish reasons. I was old enough to make my own choices. And I remember that particular morning, we lived in Chicago, and I had on like a zip-up vest or jacket, and I was in my room, and I could hear him calling me from down the hall, and I zipped up my jacket. I got completely dressed. It was a Saturday morning. I got completely dressed. I'm like, he can't touch me now. He can't touch me because I'm already dressed, and he's not going to get to me this morning.
And then she walked out the door, and that was the last time it ever happened. But you said you went into his room, and he acted like, oh, you're already dressed? And you knew there was just something that occurred.
Something changed. He realized that something was, and I was like, yeah, okay, bye, I'm going to go down and get some breakfast.
Yeah. She was able to put an end to it that day, but of course there's this legacy of thought that goes on that she still has an entire, the rest of her life to work through. That doesn't, even though, and as we move ahead on her journey, she went through several years of, therapy and college, graduating early, looking for different relationships, and then tell us about meeting your husband.
Yeah.
There's one pivotal point I want to get to before we get to my husband, and that is when I went to college. I started self-destructing, and what that looked like was the fact that I started failing classes and just partying and doing finding any man that would sleep with me, and I was looking for my MRS degree, and I was also going through therapy at that point, just by either the school counselors or whatever my insurance would pay for. And the man told me to confront my family. And I went home, and I had told my sister that I was gonna, by this point my parents had pitted us against each other. And she and I were not friends anymore. I went home, and I was gonna tell my mom and my dad that we needed to talk about this. And my mom took me up into a room and she said, "You need to listen here. It happened to me too. So you need to just back up." That's how we dealt with things. That's how, and she just wanted me to be silent about it and just to get over it. So that's how we dealt with things, but it was all out on the table, and I think I just, again, didn't know how to handle, and I just kind of went through the motions, and I realized that I had no leg to stand on with my family, so I just went through the motions, and that's when several years obviously have gone by, but I met my husband. He was a leave it to Beaver kind of guy. He was just everything I was looking for, and I had just become a Christian at 21. I had, like I said, I had been raised in the church, but not a personal relationship, and with Jeff, he mentored me, and it was just a really sweet friendship while we also dated, and that was just really kind of the healing and the therapy that I needed.
So she'd been through a lot of therapy, but I've asked her so many times, what was that point? When did you start to kind of wake up? And she said, "He helped me so much. He was rooted in the Lord. He had wisdom, and he would say things like, 'You're not your father. He cannot have you anymore.'" You said,
and that was wrong. What happened to you was wrong.
Right. No one had ever said that to her. Even at this age, nobody had ever said that was wrong. It shouldn't have happened until he did. Okay, fast forward. They have 2 kids, and we have to move quickly. But he got cancer, and he passed away. How long have you been married?
But we were married almost 7 years, and the last 3 years of that, we have been, on some level, have been dealing with his illness.
Yeah. And so he passes away, which I can't imagine. You've already been through so much pain. And you said at one point, after he did pass away, you had a huge wreck shortly after his death, and it was devastating. You were T-boned, and there was a moment when you thought maybe your kids, it scared the heck out of you.
Yeah, we were going through Jeff had just passed away, and my mom and her then husband were leaving after all the dust had settled after the funeral, and we were driving through a huge intersection, and I had the green arrow to turn left, and someone just came and plowed into us, and I turned around, and my daughter Hope was still in the car seat, and her car seat was flipped over, and she hadn't started crying yet, and
You were scared.
I was very scared.
Yeah.
And they had me on a backboard because they weren't sure if I was paralyzed or not. And I couldn't, if you've ever been on a backboard, you don't know if you're paralyzed or not because you can't move.
Yeah.
But yeah, and
I remember you said, you were like, "Lord, I cannot take anymore. Like I mentally, physically, spiritually cannot take anymore." Right at that point. But your kids were fine. They were fine. She was fine. She made it. She moves to Austin. And Heidi is so positive. And you'd have to be. To get back up again and again and again and again. Like these traumatic experiences, you said you did not want that pain to determine the rest of your life. And you said that over and over and over again. And that's a miracle, I gotta say.
yeah, that's the thing about my kids is that I absolutely did not want them to have to live with the lies and the secrets and the dysfunction. We have our own dysfunction for sure, but not in the way that I grew up.
And you never got remarried, but not because you weren't willing to. You said you didn't want anyone to come between you and your kids, but you were open to the idea.
I was, and I did date a little bit, but I always say that I'm not really jealous of people that are married because y'all have to deal with them all the time. But I'm jealous of the relationships the memories that you're making with someone. I want to be able to say, remember 10 years ago when we did this, but I get to watch the TV shows by myself.
Yeah.
Which is a big bonus,
Yeah.
I asked her what she learned as far as marriage goes, because your marriage was short, but it was awesome. And looking back, what would you change?
He taught me so much. I feel like that I've been through some post-traumatic stress syndrome, you know, and I think that there's just so many different levels of that, because I felt that I was always looking to him to try to find out what the proper responses are to certain situations and like what's normal. I remember asking him, like, you know, well people are just going to marginalize me because you're dying or that you've died. And he was like, Heidi, no, short of a child dying, you have pretty much been through, you know, the worst thing that someone can and I was just like, really? You know, I just felt like I just had to make things work. But what I would change, what I would really like you guys to come away with, I mean, just to know also that I've been through all this, but also something that I did that I regret is that I wasted time with Jeff. I spent a lot of time picking arguments with him because of my pain. I just really had to focus a lot of time on myself, but also I really prayed over the generational sin of my family, and I really feel like a lot of strongholds were broken because I took the time to pray over me and my family.
You know, we only have 15, 20 minutes to tell this very, very, very extensive story, so we can throw in that she found her husband and that it was a short but wonderful marriage, but we don't want to overlook that there were some really traumatic experiences, and with that comes there's a long journey of healing that goes, and you can pray over that generational sin, you can pray to work through that, but it does require that. It's not like she just walked into this marriage and it was like, oh, this is what it's all about, and this is amazing. This is amazing. Yeah, and there's been a long time since her husband's death. So, there's been a lot of time for her to be introspective and for her to be reflective in that. And so to tell the story doesn't mean it was easy for her to go through it.
No.
Or that any of the things that she was trying to do to go through it were wrong, even though she says things like, oh, I wasted time, picking. I think some of that was working through some of her own trauma.
Yeah,
and that's her feeling, sad that she spent some of that time doing that. But that's probably, a lot of what was necessary for her to work through that. So just wanting you guys to remember that we only have 20 minutes to tell a very extensive story.
Yeah.
So
I think you're awesome, and my mind is blown. But I do want to focus on, these are the people who are at our church. Like, these are the people who are standing up and volunteering and making a way every week. They have been through it, and she knows how much she needs the Lord. You said, there's not a man on this earth I can depend on. Not my mom, not my dad, not my husband. The Lord Jesus is the only one who has been a steady in her life. And that is amazing.
Through all of that, I'm just so thankful that God didn't allow me to falter in my faith. I think that a lot of people would have walked away from God just saying, forget this, I can do better on my own. And I knew that. I knew that I couldn't do that. That was the one thing that was for sure. But he has definitely been my friend through all of this.
You're amazing. Thank you so much.
thank you, Heidi.
I wish everyone could just stand up and give like a hug to me. You deserve a lot of hugs.